day, dear students. In the last class, we were talking about the story of Little Red Riding Hood. You heard Grimm's fairy tale and the old version of the story. Today, we are into the new version by James Finn Garner, and we have seen in the beginning how differently the story is being told. Little Red Riding Hood is now called as a young person. There was a young person or young girl instead of the term girl, and differentiating the sexes. The writer had used the term person. And furthermore, you will find that there is the old grandmother. Instead of old, he had used the appropriate words. So, what is appropriate and relevant in the modern times is the way in which the story is being told. So, we know the story, the content of the story, but it is the way to put the story across to the modern audience that the writer had aimed at. So let's see how it goes. We stopped with the page 78 and we'll continue from there. Red Riding Hood walked on along the main path. The little is dropped, so it is not a little girl or a little girl, but it is a young person named Red Riding Hood, and she walked on along the main path of the forest after answering the questions of the wolf. And for the wolf also, she has got an explanation, because he runs with the pack and now he is no longer part of the pack. You are an outcast from the society, and being an outcast from the society had really made you feel the stress and develop your own valid worldview. So that's okay. I'm going on my way. But because his status outside society had freed him from slavish adherence to linear Western style thought, the wolf knew a quicker route to Grandma's house. He burst into the house and ate Grandma, an entirely valid course of action for a carnivore such as himself. Then, unhampered by rigid traditionalist notions of what was masculine or feminine, he put on Grandma's night clothes and crawled into bed. The sum total of the story is that the wolf took a deviation and went into Grandma's house and ate Grandma, and he dressed himself in Grandma's clothes and crawled into bed. This is the summary or the original version. But the author is now telling the story with a lot of deviation, because his status outside society had freed him from slavish adherence to linear Western style thought. Because the wolf, if it is running along with the pack, will have to obey certain rules. Now that he is no longer part of the pack, he is running wild. In the same manner, human beings, if they are living as a community, will have to adhere to certain rules, and the thinking process also is shaped in that manner, the linear Western style thought. And even we who are not the Westerners, even we borrow the Western style of thought, and we also adhere to that linear view. But there are people who are outside the herd, or who are almost outcasts from the society, but who can think in a different manner, because they are not hampered, or they are not even deviated, or they are not even restricted by the community. So their thinking process will be new or varied. So this is why the wolf knew a quicker route to Grandma's house. And then he was still unhampered by rigid traditionalist notions or ideas of what was masculine and feminine, Because he was not adherent to that, he put on grandma's night clothes and crawled into bed. So he did not bother with the thought of being masculine and feminine. And this masculine and feminine idea is not something that he gave much importance to, because in a wolf pack they just do not have that notion. But for the human beings, the girls wear the girls' clothes, the boys wear boys' clothes, and that was the norm for a long, long time. And only much recently, the norm had changed from being what is the masculine and what is feminine. And so, in a way, it was totally removed from, or the wolf's identity was not a botheration for him. So the masculine and the feminine is not something that bothered him in the dressing. So being a wolf or a masculine, he dressed himself in a woman's clothes, a grandma's clothes, and crawled into bed. Okay. Red Riding Hood entered the cottage and said, Grandma, I have brought you some fat-free, sodium-free snacks to salute you in your role of a wise and nurturing matriarch. So Red Riding Hood entered the cottage, and the usual greeting is, Grandma, I have come, I have brought you something to eat. Okay, that's the usual norm of greeting. But here, again, there is a difference, because in the modern world, people go for fat free, sodium free, and even gluten free type of food, and this is the norm. And in the same way, Red Riding Hood called out and told the grandmother, Grandma, I have brought you some fat free, sodium free snacks to salute you in your role of wise and nurturing matriarch. The term old is substituted by a lot of things. Wise and nurturing matriarch. Matriarch means the head of a family of female. And so this is maybe the older grandmother is the term. And so these modern terms were substituted. From the bed the wolf said softly, Come closer, child, so that I might see you. Red Riding Hood said, Oh, I forgot you are as optically challenged as a bat. Grandma, what big eyes you have. So when the wolf called out softly to come closer so that I might see you, Red Riding Hood said, Oh, I forgot you are as optically challenged as a bat. Optically challenged is the term that we now use instead of blind. Or we can't use or accuse a person. It's like an accusation that man is blind. So this is the term that is optically challenged, the term for blind. So you are as blind as a bat. This is exactly the term. So instead of saying blind, the author had substituted it with the term, the right term of the times, and that is optically challenged as a bat. You are as optically challenged as a bat. Grandma, what big eyes you have. Naturally, the wolf's eyes are bigger, and so she just remarked on that. They have seen much, forgiven much, my dear. The wolf in Grandma's clothes answered. Grandma, what a big nose you have, only relatively, of course, but certainly attractive in its own way. She's not accusing or finding fault, but she said, What big nose you have, Grandma. Only that the original Red Riding Hood said. But here, the Red Riding Hood says, What big nose you have, only relatively, of course, and certainly attractive in its own way. She is just removing that sting from the saying, what big nose you have. You can't accuse people for the being fat or even lean and things like that in the modern times. So the wolf immediately answered, It has smelled much and forgiven much, my dear. And then the third question, Grandma, what big teeth you have. The wolf said, I am happy with who I am and what I am, and leaped out of bed. He grabbed Red Riding Hood in his claws, intent on devouring her, eating and swallowing her. So this is a third question on which the wolf acts. Red Riding Hood screamed, not out of alarm at the wolf's apparent tendency towards cross dressing, but because of his willful invasion on others' personal space. You have to remark, you have to be indent or careful about that term. But because, why did she cry out? She cried out because of the wolf's willful invasion on other person's personal space. So that is without the permission of the person, the other person or the wolf is holding on to her and without asking her permission. This is why she screamed. Her screams were heard by a passing woodchopper person, in brackets it is said, or log fuel technician as he preferred to be called. When he burst into the cottage, he saw the melee and tried to intervene. But as he raised his axe, Red Riding Hood and the wolf both stopped. On hearing the sound of Red Riding Hood, the screams were loud enough. A passing woodchopper person, understand? Passing woodchopper will be enough, but here the term is again modified in the modern times. Or instead of woodchopper, you can use the term log fuel technician. Okay, log fuel technician as he preferred to be called. The woodchopper, if you were to ask him the question, what is your job, what are you doing, immediately he would have answered, my job is I'm a log fuel technician. Okay, interesting enough. So when he burst into the cottage, he saw the melee, the confusion, the everything, and tried to intervene. He tried to interfere because to all outward appearances, it is a wolf trying to hold on to a girl, young girl, Red Riding Hood, and naturally the instinct of the man was to save her. So he tried to intervene. But as he raised his axe, because your natural instinct is to attack the attacker, in this case the wolf. So he had the axe with him, and with the axe he was about to give a blow to the wolf. And when he raised his axe, Red Riding Hood and the wolf both stopped. The two of them just stopped at the sudden appearance of a person with an axe. And just what do you think you are doing? Asked Red Riding Hood. This question is addressed to the man who came to save her. The wood chopper, or we can say log fuel technician. So she is asking, what do you think you are doing? The woodchopper person blinked and tried to answer, but no words came to him because he was not expecting an attack on him by the victim. Actually, the victim should be happy that there is somebody to save her from the clutches of the wolf. Instead of which, the girl is attacking, or she is turning against the woodchopper person. Bursting in here like a Neanderthal, trusting your weapon to do your thinking for you, she exclaimed. Sexist, speciesist, how dare you assume that women and wolves can't solve their own problems without a man's help? Bursting in here like a Neanderthal. Neanderthal is the ancient man. Like an ancient man, he means as a person who is not civilized, you are coming in with an axe and trusting your weapon to do your thinking for you. You are acting before you think. That is, he is about to use the axe to give a blow to the wolf. And she is now accusing the woodchopper person of being not in the right frame of mind, or being a Neanderthal or an uncivilized person. She calls him so many names. One name is sexist, another name is speciesist, because it is indeed a wolf that he is going to attack. How dare you assume that women and wolves can't solve their own problems without a man's help? How dare you think that a woman can't solve the problem with the wolf without the help of a man? So she forgets that she called out, she screamed. And the instinct of any human being will be to check in what is happening. And that too in the lonely forest. And when you hear the sound of a woman, not nowadays, of course, but in those early days, the manly thing to do was to go and check whether the girl who had screamed really needed any help. That was the gentlemanly thing to do in those days, but not nowadays. Understand? Nowadays, everything is upside down, so it is better not to interfere. So, this is how it is written. So, how dare you think that woman and wolf can't solve their problems without the help of a man? When she heard Red Riding Hood's impassioned speech, Grandma jumped out of the wolf's mouth, seized the woodchopper person's axe, and cut his head off. After this ordeal, Red Riding Hood, Grandma, and the wolf felt a certain commonality of purpose. When she heard Red Riding Hood's impassioned speech that women and wolf can solve their own problems without the help of a man. On hearing that, the grandma who was eaten by the wolf, who was there in the stomach of the wolf, heard it, and she jumped out of the wolf's mouth and seized the woodchopper person's axe and cut his head off with the same axe. Okay, a twist in the story. After this ordeal, actually, this is an ordeal, Red Riding Hood, Grandma, and the wolf felt a certain commonality of purpose. They were all against the man. And grandma, granddaughter, and the wolf, one who is running not in a pack but outside the society or outside the pack, these people were all marginalized, women and the marginalized. Okay, it is this way you have to think. And they found a commonality of purpose, and that is to be part of the center or part of the mainstream. And these marginalized, they speak from the margins, and they are now included in the mainstream, or most of them are. So this is how it goes. And they decided to set up an alternative household based on mutual respect and cooperation, and they lived together in the woods happily ever after. This happily ever after is a term that always is associated with the storytelling. There is no fairy tale that ends in unhappiness or in doom. Maybe doom for some people, but happily ever after is the way the story ends. But in this case, both grandma and granddaughter, and or along with the wolf, they tried to or decided to set up an alternative household based on mutual respect and cooperation. Mutual respect and cooperation are the things that are necessary with the marginalized group. And this is the way to, they are not to be undermined, they are not to be pushed aside to the margins, but they are to be brought, and their words and their actions, or they have to be acknowledged as part of the mainstream. And this is exactly how the story goes. And they lived together in the woods happily ever after. So you have a fairy tale here. The beginning and the ending are exactly like any other fairy tale. And here you will find that in between the first word or the first sentence and between the last sentence, there was once upon a time, or once upon a time is the way in a story begins, and they lived happily ever after is the way the story ends. Between these two beginnings, these two words, sentence beginnings, you find a world of difference. The world of difference is now the what is happening in the present situation and how certain words are being substituted because they give you a narrow-minded outlook on people. Like for example, once upon a time there was a blind man. Instead of being accusing him being blind or calling him by that name, you are being derogatory or sarcastical or being judgmental in that manner. So better use an optically challenged person. You have physically challenged persons, mentally challenged persons. So these are terms that are in use now, and why these terms have come into use, so that people who are really blind will not feel offended by the remark from the others. And it's our blessing that we can see, and if they can't see, it is not their fault. So you can't really point a finger at them in a sarcastic manner or not appreciative manner, and you have to respect his feelings or their feelings also. And this is why these terminology have changed so much that the author had taken, that is James Finn Garner, had taken a very ordinary or usual fairy tale or much popular fairy tale and changed it in this manner, and you will find several versions of the same in your books. Okay, several versions of the same story, that is Little Riding Hood, and those versions are really interesting also. And once you search for these versions, you will be laughing aloud at the way these versions are created from the feminine point of view and so on. And here it is the point of view of James Finn Garner, who is writing from the point of view of a 20th century or 21st century person, and the terms and terminology that he uses are indeed relevant to the modern times and totally removing the stigma from certain people and certain aspects, and it is that which is being conveyed through the portrayal of this storytelling. The story is mainly, as I told you earlier, a very small story, but here he had incorporated certain words into the story which will tell you how to use terms properly in our times and what their names are. And without telling anything about it, instead of using the term blind, he had used the term blind, optically challenged. And though it doesn't go with the terminology, that is as blind as a bat is indeed a saying, and or it is indeed a phrase that is to be used, but even then you will find that optically challenged as a bat is again something that he can very well use in the modern times. So here you find that it is something that we have to look into. And the same story you can think and rewrite in your own manner using all those terms and the modern relevance. And this version of the story will be totally different from the version, or you can tell the story from the angle of or the viewpoint of a wolf, a lone wolf at that. He is totally marginalized because he is pushed from the mainstream, and he once you are pushed away from the mainstream, your life will be lonely and you will be having a pathetic life because you will not be accepted by the society, and as such he'll have to fend for himself. Usually the wolf hunt in a pack, and so the hunting becomes easier. But once he is an outcast, he'll have to find food for his own self, and that self will find it very difficult to do that. And the warmth during the cold winter months, the pack will be together, and here he is all by himself, and he'll have to save himself from the cold. And during the cold season or during the winter season, even hunting becomes very difficult for a lonely wolf. But when you go as a pack or part of a pack, food is something that is provided by either one or one group or the other. So here it is something that you will have to understand, That is, being a lone wolf or away from the pack is not really uh, good for the person. But even then, there are rebels, and these rebels think differently. And if you have a viewpoint, or the viewpoint that is accepted by the normality of the society, you will be fashioned or you will be shaped by those opinions, and you will not be indeed not taught how to think differently. And this is why the lesson is here. You have to find an issue of current relevance and respond from multiple perspectives. And so, this is the way it is to be done. This is just an example. You can have any type of, any version of the same story and tell the story or the narrate it in your own words in the modern or from the part of the marginalized or the Dalit or the upper caste, left liberals, policymakers, NGOs, common people, academics, so on. The only thing is that you'll have to be, this is a very short, small story, and so you can put in a lot of things into it and try your hand in that. A different way of thinking. And it is this difference that will make you a person who is original and at the same time who can really understand other people and who can provide something more for humanity. If you think like any other person, then there is nothing new about your thinking process. That is why it is said that you need to be absolutely original, and only such person's ideas will be accepted. And otherwise, you are treated or you think like the herd, means that like a group of cattle. They are led by only one instinct and they are not taught differently. So, what is new about it? There is nothing new. You are like any other person, and your ideas are so common and it is the same as the other people, because it takes an original idea to stand for itself, because it takes a lot of willpower to come up with that idea. You have to think differently, and maybe your life also will be different because you go not with the herd but as a lonely wolf, not with the pack or herd, but you go with a different way of thinking. And maybe you are an outcast because the society will not accept you. Let it be, but you will be able to provide much for the improvement of the society, much better than the type of group thinking or the way the people think alike, and there is no change coming up. And change comes up from people who think differently, and they may not be people who are recognized by the society or maybe part of the crowd, but still they have a lot to contribute. And this is why the story of the wolf and Red Riding Hood and the grandmother have their own prominence in literature. And you'll find I have read different versions of the same story, and it is one story is from the point of view of a feminist. And the thing is that she just, I mean, the usual storyline, the grandmother comes out of the stomach, and together the wolf is already dead, and so they skin the wolf, and she comes up with a suitcase made of wolf skin. Okay, that is pig skin is supposed to be the type of, it is treated well and it's the costliest type of suitcase for a long time, and that was fashionable also. Likewise, she goes off with a suitcase made of wolf skin. That is a version that you will really enjoy reading, and the way it points out to the fashion of that, or the craze for fashion for the people, and so on. So each version has its own way to speak to us, and being the a story which is extremely popular, I'm sure that you will really enjoy the story and the different versions of the same story. So, in this manner, you find that you can retell a story, not just any this story, but any story. You can have your own version, and this makes you think differently, And this is exactly what is intended by this assignment. So you have a lot of people, a lot of activities or exercises for assignments, and you can tell the story by the government officials, secretaries of state, diplomats, political leaders, activists, right wing, left wing, intellectuals, common people, writers, social activists, welfare workers. From all their point of view, you can tell the story, retell the story. Sometimes you will find that there is a government version for a certain story, and there is a version by the common people. All these versions differ because each one has got a certain agenda to put across. That's why they have their own version of the story. And the common man also has got, maybe he is narrating it as such. You have seen the film Rashomon, and I'm taking you to the film because that is something that you have seen and we have finished discussion on that. You can see how one incident is told by several people and there are several versions, which makes the judge very difficult to arrive at a judgment because each version is dependent on the person's viewpoint and also how it will look on him. And this is how it is shown as a film worth noticing because of the different viewpoints of the same incident. And these viewpoints, even a ghost also speaks, and that version is also included there. So from the four different viewpoints a story is being told, and each one interesting than the other, and it is possible. And that's why that film becomes really good, and it is taken as a pointer for or to be included in this particular module because the module deals with the point of view and also how different it could be, and even the storytelling like polyphony, different voices, and these different voices are included here also. And in a way you have the voice from the marginalized, like the outcast wolf, and also the women who were outcast for a long time because they were considered to be only secondary citizens. For a long, long time, they were not given the right to vote, which means that they are regarded only as maybe cattle, and that is the manner in which they were treated. And only men folk were regarded as human beings worthy of intellect and thought, and they are the only people who can vote for a long, long time. And starting from the present world, or in this world, we can go back to these long, long time back and understand how people felt and their conditions, and from their viewpoint you can also look on certain things or certain aspects. This is why it is said that you need to have a clear mind and to see things not as the other people will think, but have your own viewpoint about certain issues and certain incidents, like Little Red Riding Hood. Let's keep the story Little Red Riding Hood for the bedtime story of our little ones. Okay, when you have little ones, you can tell them the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Don't tell them this modern version at that early stage. Maybe after some time, you can tell them this modern version because that will be initiating them into the world that they are living. Even now also the kids are being taught to use these terms like a optically challenged person. Instead of calling a man blind, they are being taught to tell the story with these terms. And if you check the smaller classes, they have already incorporated certain lessons like this so that the younger generation learn to use these terms even from such an early time rather than outrightly use the term blind man. Okay, that is just an example. You will find several such examples. So the correct type of behavior is being incorporated into the mainstream, and this is going to help a lot of people and to help the broader thinking. And I'm sure that you will be indeed going through the lesson once again. And as we finish this module, the third module, we are going through the different topics that are being discussed here. And the one is Shakespeare in the Bush, where you have already heard too much point of view, means the point of view of how to change or how to look on a Shakespearean story, especially the story of Hamlet and the versions offered to Laura. We have also gone through Rashomon, which is a beautiful film in all its aspects, and how the faith in humanity is restored in spite of the various narration of the same incident. And again, the Little Red Riding Hood, which is hilarious, at the same time thought provoking, and also going to be a lesson to be learned in our life. Okay, and there are questions to follow. We'll have the questions in the next day's class. Thank you, and hope you will read the original story. I have just told you a gist of the original story, but you can read it all by yourself. It is quite available, and in Grimm's fairy tale, if I'm right, it is in Grimm's fairy tale, or even you get it in any fairy tale book available in the library. And most of us haven't read the books, fairy tales from the books as such. We have heard it from our elders or from other places, and it is there in the books also. So you can read those books, or else just refer to the net, because I know that books are outdated now. You can search the net, and I'll still say that to me, books are not outdated. It's a great joy to open Grimm's fairy tale, that voluminous book, and read it one after the other and be transported to a magical world of the fairies and the belief in those things. And read those stories, and you may get an idea to change the storytelling and change it in the different ways in which you are asked to do it, from retell the story in the with a different viewpoint. And I hope you will try to do it at least sometime in your life. Thank you.